acting hat on. Hi Roger, thanks for coming in.
Good morning, thank you for having me.
As discussed when we developed your training plan, this will be the first of 3 sessions covering off some of the things that aren't included in your other training materials for your working in a biosecurity emergency response. So that's your, and I'm sorry for the long course codes, the AHCBR 302 and 306, which is working effectively in a biosecurity emergency response and carrying out movement and security protocols in a biosecurity response, as well as the AHCBIO 204, which is following site biosecurity procedures. So
That's the one I thought we were doing, so that's good.
excellent. So this will be the first of the 3. This is a bit of a general overview. It's going to be a desktop only. We won't be going outside for this session. It should take about 30 minutes. And we're just going to go over some basic biosecurity things, talk about the key components of setting up an infected premise. You know, I know you've done a lot of this already, so we won't drill into too much detail, but it's going through the purpose of the clean and dirty zones and entry-exit points, identifying the basic roles and responsibilities during an infected premise event, and applying your knowledge. So you're going to apply your knowledge to a simulated scenario. So I've actually got a couple of maps here that we're going to talk about, and you're going to have a look at what we might need to do in a biosecurity response. So basically that's the start. We've got our whiteboard, we've got our printed materials, and you've got your worksheet there, which I can see you've already started filling in, which is fantastic. We'll do this session. The next one will be our issuing a quarantine notice. So we'll go through how to issue a quarantine notice and how to serve that, because obviously that will be part of your role working in infected premise operations. And the final one will be actually setting up an entry exit using our EAD Go kits. So we'll go through those at that point. So I guess before we get started, is there anything you need, or do you have any questions before we get going?
No, I'm ready to go, thank you.
You are ready to go. All right, fantastic. So the first thing I wanted to cover, and please let me know if you already know, the differences between our infected premise, and I've written it on the board, suspect premise and a dangerous contact premise. So do you already know the differences between those?
No, but I can guess.
All right, we'll have a guess. And
An infected premise is infected. So suspect means you suspect there's an infection. And dangerous, I'm guessing there might be human, whatever you would like to call. Put a good word
really
on
close.
that.
So
Zoology.
an infected premise is one where we've confirmed that the infection has occurred. So I maybe was a bit tricky there. So generally we go from everything is a suspect premise. So when we first notice that there's something weird going on, suspect that there could be disease occurring, that property would be given the status of suspect. Once we've confirmed the disease, and that's through laboratory testing, can take a few days, that will be titled an infected premise. And I know you've already done the module of your MAX forms. That information that we collect designates any movement of things or animals or product from the property, and that's where we get our dangerous contact premises. So that's where, say, in a weed response, it might be that they've moved machinery to another property, so there could be a risk of spread there. So we would designate that as a dangerous contact whilst we investigate to see if there's any issues. We're mostly going to focus on animal emergency diseases today, although not specific ones, because I know, within your role it's not your job to diagnose what the disease is, it's just to work in the operational space. I do apologise. So that's basically an infected premises once it's been confirmed by laboratory testing. Suspect is if we firmly believe there is a disease, and a dangerous contact is things that might have spread. So you've worked on an IP. The next step is to sort of talk about what roles there might be in an infected premise operations. Can you think of any that you've done whilst you've been on site?
Roles, gate.
Yep. So gate control and
Rate
movement control.
movement control, site manager.
Yep.
Don't know, that's all the three that come to the top of my mind.
That's okay. And I know you've done one of them, so you've probably just not thought about it. So the disinfectant point, or
Yep.
the disinfection crew, so they're the people that are washing the vehicles and that sort of thing. And the clean dirty zone management, that would be where you have a movement patrol officer who's signing people on and off the site and ensuring that they are clean when they're leaving. So when we lay out our entry-exit on an IP, we've got our 3 zones that we use, the red zone, the yellow zone and the green zone. And that designates our movement from dirty to clean. And all of that's a part of how we set those things up. So, given I know you've done a lot of work, I don't want to teach you how to suck an egg because you already know how to do that. I guess the next step we could work into is our scenarios. So we might start with this nice easy one because I'm sure this is something you've seen more recently. And I'd just like to talk through with you, and I've got some textures here if you want to draw on it. This is just an aerial photograph of the pic of the property. So the scenario is that you've received a call that there is an infected premise identified in your area and you're responsible for beginning the setup. So you've been and you've worked on an IP, now you're going to be the IP site supervisor. So you're going to be the guy making it all work.
Yep.
Can you identify 3 things you need to do to set up? So nothing's here yet. We've got, let's call it avian influenza, so we can see our sheds here. They've been designated infected, so we've received lab reports that say, yes, they have tested positive to influenza type A. What do we need to do next?
Set up an entry-exit point.
Yep. So that's one. I think that's one of your questions. Otherwise, I might just write it down for you. So entry, exit.
Critical setup tasks.
So what would you be looking for in order to do that? Not equipment, just on the property.
On the property.
Where are you going to do it? What's
Well, the suitable
common
site,
sense?
so you need to be far enough back from the problem area. You want to use existing infrastructure if you can to try and narrow the point, and somewhere that's easily accessible to vehicles if you allow them.
Yeah. Usually, somewhere where there's a gate is
Yeah.
also kind of important. So, you know, if this is our infected property, the front gate's here, it would make sense to have the entry-exit somewhere near the front gate because that's where the main traffic will be flowing. So on this map, if we needed to secure this property and designate it as an infected premise, and there is actually no wrong answer here unless you leave the sheds outside, where would you put your exclusion? Like, where would you call the infected area? If you want to grab a texter and draw on it, that would be awesome, and just say, this is where I'd designate. Yep, absolutely perfect. That's what we do 99.9% of the time, is we go with the boundaries.
Beautiful.
Makes it really easy, really straightforward. What are some things you might need to think about, or some challenges that you might have? This is quite an extensive area. We've got our front gate down here where we're going to do our entry-exit. So do you want to put a little, I don't know, star there for entry-exit? Yeah, an arrow, that works. What else might we need to consider? So if there's other gates, what would we do to stop people going through those
We
other
need to
gates?
lock and sign the other gates,
Yep.
I would suggest.
Beautiful. So pop a padlock on them and a little sign that says, you know, closed, quarantine, do not enter. We do have specific quarantine signs that you can use.
Yep.
And you should be provided with those along with your other equipment. Alright, so what else might you do? So you've got your gates locked, you're setting up your entry-exit. What's another thing that you might do?
Get a log book to start logging. Footbath first, sorry. Footbath.
Yep, so your actual physical
Footbath and
entry.
PPE, yep.
Beautiful, but a logbook is also really good because
Mhm.
you want to start detailing what's come on and
Yes.
off. And that's where you start asking for your trailers, your wheel washers, all of your equipment to start coming
Mhm.
out. Which I know, given you've worked in the logistics area, you'd be well aware that as soon as an IP is declared, they start asking for a lot of things.
Mhm.
And that's where your skills will come in very handy. All right, so what are some other challenges that you might have? So we've got that there's lots of gates and you fixed that. Are there any other challenges you might think of?
Probably just the property owner is probably one.
Yeah,
Just
sometimes they
because
can
of their
be
ability to
challenging.
know, well, their ability to know how to get in and out and where to, how cooperative they want to be, I guess, they pose a risk to
Yep,
probably
so
gain
let's-
access easier.
Let's throw another one in. We'll have a look at this. This is a slightly different scenario, and you can see I've got on here carcass points marked. So these are where animals have perished. So this is a cattle property. Whilst this was going on though, the owner was also sowing some of the other paddocks. So there were an extensive number of hired equipment on the site. Would that change anything? So would that change your consideration? So the pick is what's coloured in red. If you had to designate what you would consider to be the infected area, would that change anything?
If equipment's been moving over the infected area to somewhere else, then that changes your potential area.
Yeah. What if he had an outblock over here that wasn't pick mapped because it only has
Yep.
grass or something,
Yep.
plants?
So dangerous contact premise is your consideration, I guess, is it? Is that what we're saying?
Well, no, it's
Moving
just,
machinery or animals across to somewhere else?
it depends on what the disease is, and that's where it gets very complicated. So this particular map is an anthrax positive property, and they were working the soil on a separate part of the farm to where the carcasses had died. So we literally quarantined the area where the animals had been and didn't quarantine the other part of the farm on the condition that that machinery was not brought into the area where the animals had perished. Because of the way that anthrax works, if they haven't been in contact with the soil or the animals, they are lower risk of spreading the disease. So you can, reduce that, which is why I use this as a good example. Avian influenza is a virus that's spread in the air and atmosphere, and this is probably the best approach. With an anthrax property, we can be a little more small.
Yep.
But you had it on perfect. If they'd been working this soil next to the dead cow, you would consider the other outlying blocks as dangerous contact premises and things like that. So what have we got in your questions that we haven't looked at?
Yeah, does an infected premise differ from a suspect premise? Well, we've done that.
So we did cover that. What is an infected premise? And that's beautiful. You've got that. And you've got your 3 steps. So we've looked at our map here, and you've done a really good job there.
Describe one challenge and how to address it.
Yeah. So can you think of any other challenges? What if you didn't have anyone on farm?
If there's no one on farm,
Yeah, if there's nobody there, how do you know where to go, what to do?
well, you try and contact them first, wouldn't you? You'd look up their pick and get their phone number and make contact.
Yep. Would you go for a drive around?
No,
Why
I
not?
wouldn't. Because I don't know what I'm dealing with yet, and I might be spreading something somewhere that it doesn't need to be spread to.
Yeah, good idea. You could probably drive around the outside
Yep.
though and have a look and go, okay, I'm not sure how many gates there are. Or you'd task one of your team and say, hey, Paul, can you drive around these roads and see if there's any gates that we need to secure? Remember, you're the boss man, so you don't have to do all the work, but you can drive the ship. So you can work out from a surveillance of the area what you need.
Yep.
If you don't have all of the equipment. You know how to put through a logs request to ask for that. And any of those things. What if there's an electrical safety issue?
If there's an electrical safety issue, I guess that's a pretty broad question. You stay right away from it and you get someone to come and take care of it.
It was intentionally a very broad question, so you'd raise that up through your ops manager. Hey, we've got an electrical safety issue here. Can you send us out something?
Yep.
So we've covered off most of those things. So on here, where are you going to wash your truck? Let's do this one. Let's draw on here where we might wash our truck. So we've decided that we're going to quarantine the entire area. All of this is quarantined, and that's our designated infected premise. We're going to have followed the boundaries, but I'm a lazy drawer. This is the front gate here.
Yeah, that's the front gate there.
Probably
so,
helps to know
yeah.
that.
So in this area here somewhere.
Yep. What if I was to tell you that there is a house here? How might that differ what we do?
Well, I'd move it to another good spot, I suppose, which is going to depend on the internal laneways of the farm and where the truck's got to go, but it looks like that road seems to link up everything fairly well.
Yeah.
So you can make that an exit point, entry exit.
See, and I'm deliberately making this more difficult for you. This is the concrete feeding area, and this used to be a dairy. So do you think that would change it much, really? So this is an actual scenario. This is one where we have used it in the past, and it's terribly bad because this map is quite zoomed out.
So there's a concrete feed pad. Well, it's either going to be a hindrance or a help, is it? Are we washing down the concrete and using that as a better wash site, or is it being used and we need to avoid it completely?
Yeah, well, that's something you can consider. And the only way you're going to know that is to gear up and go and have a look. So your first step on an IP is to go for a walk, see what's there, see what you can use, see what's going to be a problem for you. So in this scenario, these are all true. There is a house there. It's a lot smaller than I've drawn on the map. It's very given that that's the old dairy. But the house was unoccupied. So we actually used that. You've seen it a lot of our responses. We have a site hut and things like that. We used the front veranda of the house as our little office, little shaded area. We didn't go into the house because that's not really appropriate, but we used the front area to set up our logs, things like that. We have the little foot bath at a gateway. So gateways are fantastic in a smaller premise for your entry exit for people because you can close them when everyone goes home. You can shut the gate and no one's coming in. And we set up the decontamination area down the side of the dairy here because this was actually all asphalted and very well drained, which made it extremely handy. But these are all things you'd work through. So you'd go out there. Day one would be taking any additional samples, which you won't be doing, or setting up your infected premise, which means you get on farm and you have a look around. It may be that the farm has a vehicle that's sitting here that you can use and go for a drive and go, I'm going to drive around and have a look. It might be that you have to have a look and say, okay, this is too big for me to drive around and to walk around and there's no vehicle, I want one. Mr. Logsman, can you send me a car? And then before you do that, you're going to make sure that you've wrapped the seats in plastic and made it as easy as possible to clean when we're coming off. But they're all things that we think about as part of our disinfectant point, gate control, clean and dirty zone management, and it's about forward planning so that it makes it easier at the end of the day to pack up and go home. But you did that really well, and you've outlined all the things. So I guess, is there any, if you had to do this, if this was the scenario for you tomorrow, which is the wrong time of year, but not impossible. Hey, Roger, we've got an anthrax case out at this property. can you go out and set up the initial IP?
Mhm.
Is that something you think you could do, or are there questions that you'd have?
I think I could do it. There's always questions you'll have.
Yeah, well, what
And
are they?
there's-
Let's talk about some
Well,
of them.
I guess, sorry, so the questions I would have would be dependent on the situation.
All right. So let's use the actual scenario. Day one, there were 3 dead cows. Penside test confirmation of positive for anthrax bacillus, and sent for laboratory analysis.
Mhm.
So day one, it was 3 dead, 3D, and was designated a suspect premise. So that's your day one scenario. Day two, we had 3 more dead,
Mhm.
3 dead, and the initial testing came back from PCR confirming that it was confirmed by PCR as being an IP, so infected with anthrax. There were another 196 head on farm that were unvaccinated, and a vaccination team started on day 2, vaccinating those animals using these yards to muster. What other questions? So that's a real scenario, that's what happened. This was in our 2024 anthrax outbreak.
Yep. So if the question is setting up, that's fine. I would be comfortable with the setting up.
Yep. What would you ask for?
So I would need, depends on what you need. You need a gate, footbaths, grates, hog books, PPE, all sorts of PPE, breathing suits.
Yep, so you get your EAD trailer coming out with all your PPE.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
A decontamination trailer for your
Yep.
cars and vehicle movements and things.
Yep.
We're very fortunate that anthrax doesn't jump up and run across the ground, climb up your leg and try and kill you. So the need for sort of a lot of heavy equipment is less. But and again, you're just setting up the IP, so I don't expect you to be an expert on the disposal, decontamination, all of that stuff. You'd have someone else that's taking care of that for you, going, okay, we're going to start disposing of these animals, so we'd be getting some heavy machinery coming in, so your logbooks are really good. So you need to track when they come in, when they come out.
Yep.
Your chemicals that you'd need, so your disinfection chemicals would be something to ask for. And that would be something that you could look up yourself. So all of our chemicals that we use on an infected premise are used under permit from the APVMA, you get that wrong, Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medical Association. But again, that should come from your ops team where they should say, hey, Rog, here's the permit, this is what you use, we're sending you a boatload of whatever it is you need. But you need to understand and read the safety data sheet so that you don't kill yourself using it. Particularly for anthrax, it's a really nasty chemical that's really bad for you. What other questions might you ask?
Can't think of any other questions really.
How many people would you want? You're just doing the entry, exit, gate control, vehicle cleaning.
I'd want another 4 and myself probably.
Yeah. 4 people plus you.
Yeah.
What if you had to have 2 excavators coming off? Would you want more than 4 people?
Depends on the timing, but yes, potentially you will, and depends on how much equipment you've got access to. So if you've got to clean multiple machines at a time, then you're going to need more people, but not if you've only got one.
Yeah, beautiful.
They've got to say lots of
And
considerations.
if they have to wait, they have to wait.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
And you'd have someone doing permits and written authorities for your movement, so that's not a you concern. But This was just meant as a basic, what would you think about and how would you do it? We've covered off most of that. Have you got any other questions?
Nope.
No. So if tomorrow this happened,
Yep.
you'd be my go-to guy while I go and do all the samples. You'd be getting this done for me.
Yep.
You'd make it happen.
Certainly.
I'd come out and there'd be muffins and cold
Yeah, it'd be all done. Yeah.
The logs guys would be really happy. You talk too fast, I think. Not even sure that that's recording.
Oh.
That didn't work. Oh, crap. All right, so we'll wrap that one up. You've done a really good job. Have you filled in all your questions?
Yep.
Do you want to go over those? I can see you haven't written a lot, but I did leave a lot of space in there.
Yep.
Oh, good job you're putting your actual name on there. Yep, good. Love the one-word answers. It
Yeah.
makes it very easy for me to answer you. One challenge and how to address it. So you've written challenges down, but you haven't written how you might address them. So do you want to cover that off? You've got property owner. I assume he's the challenge, or they are the challenge.
Well, it was in reference to what we were talking about.
Yep.
I didn't realise.
Look at you go, that's fantastic.
Right, so call the property owner if they're not there. That's a good challenge. Yep.
You did sort of cover them anyway. The multiple entries, you lock the gates, put signs up. Those are sort of what I was looking for. But that's great. You've got something in there, which is what I need for your assessment. And obviously you completed maps here, which is great. So there's nothing you really need to expand on that. It's just, this was meant as a bit of an intro to what do we do and why is it important, and you've covered that off well. And our main goal of having this area secured and our entry exit clean dirty zones is so that we can reduce the risk of spread. You can't completely eliminate spread. It may happen because it could be an environmental issue. There could be a windstorm that blows all the dirt down the road, depending on what the disease is that we're dealing with and how it's spread. It can be spread very different ways, and not all of those you can control, but we're reducing the risk as much as we can by securing the area, setting up those entry exit points and knowing our chemicals and how to use them, and PPE and all of those things. So that's pretty much the key concepts. So the next step would be issuing our quarantine notice, and that's in our next session. And that will cover off basically the legal stuff behind how we do that. I'll get you to actually write a quarantine notice. You'll be issuing it to a not real person, and it's not a real quarantine notice, but that's what we'll do next. So is there anything else you want to talk about for this one? Otherwise, I will see you next week.
All right, looking forward to doing it again next week.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Roger. I will turn this off.